How's it going? Just following on from the last video, 6 steps towards better health. I'll put a link to that video in the comments in case you missed it. But today I want to talk to you about carbohydrates and how will carbohydrates make you fat. So carbohydrates have been taking a bit of a bad rap again recently, and they've kind of started taking the place of what fat has been for the last 40 years. Yes, you can get fat through overconsumption of carbohydrates, but should you avoid carbohydrates? Certainly not. To kind of explain carbohydrates, first kind of know what we're talking about. So we have in carbohydrates, we have, say, whole food carbohydrates and refined. So whole food is anything that comes from the earth. Within that we have simple and complex. So in layman's terms, just think a simple carbohydrates is something that gets processed really easily, simply. And complex carbs is a little bit more complicated, within the body, and it takes a little bit longer. So whole food simple carbohydrates would be things like fruit, and fruit juices. More whole food complex carbs would be things like rice and quinoa and potatoes. And then refined simple would be sugar, top of the list. And then refined complex would be a lot of your wheat-based products, so bread and pasta and cakes and biscuits and all. So when we're looking at consumption of carbohydrates, consuming whole food carbohydrates to what the body requires is perfectly okay. It's generally overconsumption of the refined carbohydrates is what's going to make you put on weight, and we're going to go into a little bit of detail now, explain how that happens. So, for any of us who are overweight, let's see if you can, associate yourself with any of these points. So let's say you're getting up in the morning and you're having things like breakfast cereal or toast for breakfast. Mid-mornings you're having bagels or muffins. Lunchtime you're having, maybe thinking you're being healthy, having wraps and fruit. Afternoon probably coffee and biscuits. And then for dinner you're having probably potatoes or pasta. But what happens there is, so three simple things of what happens when we consume carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are going to make your blood sugars rise, or your blood glucose levels rise. And then with that, when that blood glucose is risen, your body can do kind of one of three things with it. So let's say you get up in the morning, you have some porridge. So porridge is a whole food complex carbohydrate. So you have some porridge, you go off on a run. So when that porridge has been digested, it's going to raise your blood sugar levels. So when your blood sugar levels is up, your body can use the glucose directly from the blood for your energy. So when you're on your run, your body is using the glucose directly from the blood. On the flip side of that, you might have heard people doing fasted cardio in the mornings. For most general population people, is it really required? It can help some. Other people have negative effects because, depending on how long you've been fasting for, if you stopped eating at 6 p.m. and you're not training until 9 a.m. the next morning, there's 15 hours without any food, and then you're looking to try and train. So sometimes your performance might be hindered. But let's say on the flip side, you get up and you just go for a run. When you're on that run, let's say you've been fasting for 15 hours, your body, depending on the intensity, your body can utilize some of your glycogen stores. So we store glycogen in our liver and our muscles to the equivalent of about 2,000 calories. So once you're eating relatively normal, you will have roughly about 2,000 calories stored as a reserve energy in your body. So when you're out and you're fasted and you're running and you're dipping into your glycogen stores, then you come back and let's say you have some porridge. When that porridge is going to obviously raise blood sugar levels, insulin is going to be released, and what the body can do then is it's going to take the glucose out of the blood and replenish your glycogen stores in the muscles and probably some in the liver. But then how we gain weight is through the third phase. So the third phase is, let's go back to the person that's having the cereals and toast and the bagels and the muffins and the wraps and the fruit and the sugar and the biscuits or sweets in the afternoon and potatoes and pasta. So what happens with that person is that, let's say you're working a 9-to-5 office job, you're fairly sedentary, you're sitting at a desk most of the day, you're sitting in the car, your blood sugars are risen, but your glycogen stores are full. But your body has to do something with this energy. So what it does is it's going to send it back to the liver, convert it, and store it into fat cells. So, when you were doing this like meal after meal, day after day, week after week, month after month, and it just prolongs that, it's just gradually adding more fat, adding more fat, adding more fat. And that simply is how we can store body fat through carbohydrates. And what you'll hear things about like GI, like low GI, high GI foods. When you're dealing with whole foods, within reason, it doesn't matter. If you were eating an apple, it wouldn't care. If you're drinking, 4 juiced apples, then it matters. But where it really applies is definitely when it comes to refined foods, with sugars and a lot of wheat-based products, is that it's going to, increase your blood sugars rapidly. You're going to spike your insulin, and the insulin then is going to transport it. So where that comes into difficulty then is when this is like going on for months and years, and you're getting more and more overweight, is that your cells become what's known as insulin resistant. And this is where we start talking about type 2 diabetes. And what happens is that the cells aren't allowing insulin in to allow the glucose in. And this is where then you have type 2 diabetes, or insulin resistant diabetes. And basically your blood sugar levels start rising and rising. So it's a lot of people that I treat, if they're excessively overweight, I'll just take it for granted that they're insulin resistant as it is, and we can monitor their carbohydrates through that. What you don't want then is basically that your pancreas stops producing insulin, because then you have to start injecting it. That's type 1 diabetes. So type 1 diabetes, then people, there is people there that have it from childhood. That's a bit more down to genetics as well. But the people that develop it after type 2 diabetes go on to type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes then, it's the same thing. It's like, just because you can inject insulin, your blood sugars are still constantly rising, you're constantly injecting insulin, and the body then is probably still going to be resistant to some of the insulin, so you have to be injecting more insulin, and you're still storing all of it as fat. So even if you're already at the stage of type 2 diabetes, is reversible. Type 1 diabetes, probably not so much, but you can still, have better body composition and better health in understanding how carbohydrates work and how to monitor your blood sugars better. One thing to watch out for is when you're looking at foods is insoluble fiber. So insoluble fiber is a type of carbohydrate, but it doesn't get absorbed into the body. So when like you're recommending to people, you might have heard like, eat as much green leafy veg as you want and colourful veg and all. And generally a lot of high fiber foods, you can kind of within reason have unlimited supply at your meals, because the carb intake of it is going to be quite low, because the fiber is going to get basically flushed right through you. So when I'd consider people, say anywhere from a 9-stone female to a 15-stone male, 150 grams would be classed as low carb. But a lot of people now, because carbs have this real taboo about it, they're consuming even less. Now 150 grams of whole food carbs, it can be quite tough to get into you. So let's take a cup measure of just raw porridge oats. A cup measure of raw porridge oats is roughly about 50 grams of carbohydrates. A cup measure of uncooked rice is roughly about 50 grams of carbohydrates. A decent size, like say baked potato, is roughly about 40 grams of carbohydrates on its own. If you start adding other stuff onto the potato, obviously there's going to be more to it. An apple is about 25 to 30 grams of carbs. A banana is 30 to 35 grams of carbs. So if you're taking in carbs just through whole foods, to add up to 150 grams, which isn't a whole lot, you could easily be dipping in throughout your 3 meals. And not be too worried about weight gain. Obviously, we're going to have to start, in further videos, we'll talk about fats and we're going to talk about protein. You're going to have to look at energy expenditure throughout the day. And we don't just mean exercise, we just mean your day-to-day activities as well. Like if you're a person who's getting up in the morning, driving to work, sitting at a desk all day, driving at home, sitting at a couch all night, and that's your 7 days a week, you probably don't really need a massive amount of carbohydrates just for your general day-to-day body functions. Although you'll still need a certain amount of calories, we'll talk about that more, as in how much fats and proteins then you'll require. But just on carbohydrates, hopefully that clears up a little thing for you. Yeah, the next two videos we'll be talking about fats and proteins, and then anything else just add it into the comments. Even any questions on this video, just put it in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks again.